It has been the largest individual Pro Tour of all time. 510 players came here to Atlanta, Georgia, thinking they had a shot at the first Pro Tour title of the season. 502 of them have already been proven wrong. 7 more will have their dreams come to an end between now and the end of our Day 3 broadcast. And finally, there will be only one, because there can be only one. Unless you're at the news desk, when there can be only 4. Rich, Maria, Eduardo, and a great pleasure to welcome one of the Team Series reigning champions from Team Ultimate Guard, Reed Duke. Reed, welcome to the news desk. Thanks for giving us your Sunday.
Oh, thanks a lot for having me. I mean, this is a rush for me. I got to play the Pro Tour all weekend, and now I'm here covering my first ever Pro Tour top 8, which is a top 8 that features 2 of my Magic heroes, Hall of Famers and role models, guys that I came up watching.
How was the Pro Tour for you?
It was great. I chose Golgari for standard, played it to 7-3 record and 4-2 in draft, which put me in 29th place overall.
Which for most people in the field would be the stuff that dreams are made of, because 11-5 is the record where you come back. And for you, it's kind of a professional day at the office. 11-5 right in the middle of your range, 9-7 very disappointing, top 8 fantastic, and you were slap in the middle of that.
Yeah, you said it. It's sort of right where you want to be. I didn't hit a home run, but followed a slow, steady trajectory to a finish that I'm pleased with.
All right, so good stuff. Well, great, as I say, to have Reed with us. If you are joining us for the first time this weekend, it has been a really good one. Maria, what are you looking forward to here on Day 3?
Well, this top 8's got a lot of decks that I really love. White Weenie is my favorite archetype to play, so I'm a little bit jealous of everybody in the top 8. I'm just really excited to see these decks do their thing and get their moment in the spotlight.
Eduardo, how about you?
I'm going to be interesting to see, especially the top half of the bracket here, where we have our 2 outliners, right? Jeskai Control and Izzet Drakes, because Yuuya's going to have a really tough road. The Izzet Drakes deck usually not favored in these white matchups. But Wilson, almost mono good matchups, except for Yuuya. So that dynamic's important.
All right, great stuff. Well, let's talk about the bracket then. Let's put it up on screen and we'll show you what's coming your way here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. We are going to start our coverage with the top half of the bracket. That means Wilson Mock of Canada against Andrew Elenbogen of the United States with red-white-aggro, and then Yuuya Watanabe, the Japanese Hall of Famer with Izzet Drakes, will take on Singapore's Tay Jun Hao with red-white-aggro. Then this afternoon, or later in the morning, we'll go to Denmark against France, the all-European clash of Casper Nielsen against Jeremy Desani, and then the second Hall of Famer in the top 8, Luis Scott Vargas, faces off against Michael Burnett in the All-American quarter-final. So that's the plan, and to take us through it, let's go to quarter-final 1. Maria, take it away.
All right, let's start things off with Wilson Mock from Canada. He is 27 years old. This is just his 5th Pro Tour start. As you can see, there are no Grand Prix top 8s, and this is his first Pro Tour top 8, so congratulations to him. He listed his previous Magic accomplishments on our little player survey as just like a sad face emoji, so this is his first big one.
But if you're going to go for one,
yeah, let's
make it a Pro Tour, not a Grand Prix, right? It's like, good job.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a look at the deck that he's bringing to the table. Jeskai Control. All right, Eduardo, what is this deck trying to do?
Essentially, I think the headline act is those 4 Deafening Clarions. In a field full of these kind of white aggressive decks, the Sinister Sabotage, the Chemist's Insight, those are good to get an advantage, but Deafening Clarion into Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, that's going to be Wilson's plan.
How scared is he of falling behind really quickly?
It should be okay. At least for the first games, Deafening Clarion kind of like catches up any problem. Also, 2 Cleansing Nova. So even in some scenarios, you can use something like a Revitalize, an Essence Scatter, a Key Negate to buy time until you get to the point where you can cast that Cleansing Nova, kind of acting as the 5th or 6th Deafening Clarions. And once those kind of get into play, the only card that really, I would say, Game 1 Wilson would be worried about is something like a Danto Vanguard.
So let's take a look at our second player that he'll be playing against, and that is Andrew Elenbogen of the United States. He is a silver pro on Team Cardboard Live. He has 3 Grand Prix top 8s, including Dallas earlier this year. 600 Grand Prix matches played, which I think is really awesome. Lists his previous achievement as winning the Michigan High School Chess Team Tournament in back-to-back years. So not only good at Magic, let's take a look at what deck he decided to bring to the tournament. It is red-white-aggro. Okay, same question, Eduardo. What is this deck's deal?
I think the Venerated Loxodon kind of spoils it, as well as the Benelish Marshal. a bunch of 1-drops and try to get as many as possible. When you're playing 4 Snubborn Sentry, your plan is to just overload the board. But Snubborn Sentry, not exactly the threat you kind of want against these control decks. Very good if you can get to a wide board, but a wide board is exactly what Wilson's trying to punish. What this deck tries to do, put a bunch of cheap creatures into play and push forward.
So just for people at home wondering what the red mana is in here for.
The sideboard. All the red cards in the sideboard, there's actually 2 extra Clifftop Retreats there to kind of power 4 mana spells such as Experimental Frenzy, which, especially on Friday, we've kind of seen a lot of matches just come down to that card. And it's going to be a key card in the post-board matches.
Yeah, Experimental Frenzy was our card of the day on Friday because it was. How aware were you, Reed, as a team, that Experimental Frenzy was off the charts nuts?
Yeah, it was on our radar for sure, either as a sideboard card or a driving force behind the mono-red decks. And we had some possible deck choices in our gauntlet that we decided to shy away from because of a decided weakness to Experimental Frenzy. We certainly thought that was going to be a card people would turn to prey on these slower decks.
All right, great stuff. So let's look at our second quarterfinal then. And we begin with Yuuya Watanabe. He is the Platinum Pro. He is one of the true giants in the top 8, 5 Pro Tour top 8s. He's also World Champion from 2012, World Magic Cup Champion in 2017, the team event, of course, for Japan, 7 Grand Prix titles, hundreds of thousands of dollars won. And let's take a look at the deck that he is going to play, and it is Izzet Drakes. So I guess there should be some Drakes in there somewhere, and there they are, 4 Enigma Drake and 3 Crackling Drake. So Reed, what is this deck all about?
Well, it's largely about those Drakes. Those creatures are efficiently costed flyers. 4 toughness, actually pretty crucial in the matchup against the white decks, but they also just get huge. This deck is mostly fueled by cantrips, cards that draw you into more cards, stuff like Chart a Course, Opt. So Yuuya is going to be great at filling his graveyard with spells, and if he's lucky, with Arclight Phoenix, which is a card that he can generate value from for free by returning it from the graveyard, incidentally, by casting all of these Opts, cheap burn spells, jumpstart cards.
How big a deal is Goblin Electromancer? Because I'm looking at Radical Idea costing 1 and a blue, Chart a Course 1 and a blue, and Lava Coil 1 and a red. With the Goblin Electromancer in play, those will become single mana spells. Are we going to see a lot of that happening, or is that not really that important to this deck?
Oh, it's quite important. Goblin Electromancer is a card that fuels this deck's most explosive draws, and in fact, there are similar takes on this archetype that don't include Goblin Electromancer. But I think, particularly when playing against a white deck that's not going to have a lot of cheap removal, playing turn 2 Goblin Electromancer is exactly what Yuuya Watanabe wants to do in order to deploy his hand quickly, keep pace with the very fast white decks, and be able to return those Arclight Phoenixes as fast and easily as possible.
All right, so on the other side of the table, it's Tay Jun Hao of Singapore from Grey Ogre Games, the Silver Pro here. First Pro Tour top 8, but he's got plenty of Grand Prix experience, couple of Grand Prix top 8s at home in Singapore in 2015, and more recently, Hong Kong last year. Let's take a look at his list, and he is on red-white-aggro. And this time around, slightly different to what we saw with Andrew Elenbogen, this time the red is in the main deck. Reed, what's going on with this deck?
Well, you see that one red card that it's all about. The entire splash is based around, at least in the main deck, Heroic Reinforcements, which, boy, that is a terrifying card. I've been playing against it all weekend and the week prior practicing. This is the card that so many turns you just live in fear. You have to say, boy, I really hope they don't have Heroic Reinforcements, because maybe you've stabilized the board, you have a couple blockers, but the additional haste creatures plus making your whole team bigger, forcing the opponent to take massive damage, make unfavorable blocks, it's exactly what this red-white deck wants to do at the top of the curve. So Tay Jun Hao is going to want a nice curve out where he's hitting his land drops and deploying some creatures, and then following up with a big punch like Heroic Reinforcements, Banalish Marshal, Venerated Loxodon, to just put a tremendous amount of power and toughness onto the battlefield as quickly as possible. That's the strategy.
You talk about that element of fear. I think of a card like Disinformation Campaign in Guilds of Ravnica Draft, where you see, oh, they've stuck with an island, now here's a swamp. Turn 3, that's a Disinformation Campaign, and then the whole game is starting to resolve around that, and you feel helpless. Is that the problem with heroic reinforcements? You're playing a fair-ish game of Magic. They've gone, oh, here's a Dauntless Bodyguard, sure, or the little flyer, yeah. Okay, a Danto Vanguard, that's pretty good card. They've got red. And now it's like shields up, but you can't do that. You're essentially cold to the heroic reinforcements.
Well, in my mind, playing this matchup, there's sort of two categories of games. There's the first where I'm doing really, really well, and I have the board stable, and I'm thinking maybe I can win this game, and I start thinking, how can I protect myself against heroic reinforcements? But that's the less common type of game. The more common is, yeah, I'm just dead if they have it, so let's hope they don't have it.
Well, I think about it from the opposite axis, which is I'm worried playing the aggressive deck, right? Do I play scared versus decks that have tools against me like Jeskai Control, or do I just jam with my creatures and hope for the best?
It really varies. Like when Reed's experience comes from Golgari mid-range, where just jamming usually is correct because you're trying to outrace the turn 6, find finality. But with the Jeskai Control deck, definitely clearing and costing free mana, sometimes you're going, look, if I don't go for it, like I'm just gonna lose this game, because you can play around it a lot more post-board, but pre-board sometimes you can, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna have to card check. Do you have it? And yes, no might determine the game.
Do they have it? We're about to find out. Wilson Mock against Andrew Elenbogen, and first, Yuuya Watanabe against Tay Jun Hao as the quarterfinals begin here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica.
"16 grueling rounds of Swiss across both draft and standard. We have 8 champions assembled for the finals of our Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica here from Atlanta. My name's Riley, joined by Paul Cheon, and I tell you what, we've got a real showstopper lined up for you. Yuuya Watanabe facing off, very much headlining our first set of quarterfinals. I'm told these Titans of Magic are in readiness in the feature match area. So let's get down there right here and right now and get underway with the quarterfinals of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the feature match area for the first time today here at Pro Tour Sunday. Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. The top 8 is upon us. The quarterfinals, of course, kicking off with Yuuya Watanabe and Tay Jun Hao on the front table. My name's Riley Knight, and joining me from Wizards Are Indeed is Paul Shan. Good morning, Paul. Great to have you along.
Good to be here.
We're going to kick things off with these two extremely powerful players here. They've done a great job all weekend of really crushing the field, dominating with dominating performances. Kicking things off, of course, Yuuya Watanabe, the Japanese Hall of Famer. This guy is an absolute powerhouse. Oh my goodness me. He's got 500,000 Pro Tour top 8s, half a squillion GP top 8s, and one of the biggest names in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, one of the 2 other players with maybe a unique deck relative to the rest of the field. Currently, the top 8 has 6 red-white variants, and then there is an Izzet Drake's deck along with a Jeskai Control deck.
His opponent for this round is Tay Jun Hao out of Singapore, this fellow. And I tell you what, he's come so close, Paul. He's come so close. He lost 2 consecutive wins at a recent Pro Tour in Bilbao, Pro Tour Realms of Ixalan, against Reed Duke and then John Finkel. But hey, he's done good this time around to get all the way there, but a mountain to climb for the Singaporean here. Rustwing Falcon going to kick things off, so really off to a fly. The old M19 intro deck getting it done here.
Yeah, trusty Rusty, as we call him in R&D. We've definitely had variations of white aggressive decks with this card in it. A lot of 1-mana, 2-power options in the format, but Tay Jun Hao looking to go to the skies with Rustwing Falcon in here.
But here's that start, Paul, that Reed was referring to as we kick things off for this round. Turn 2 Goblin Electromancer, such a scary sight against these white decks. They don't have great answers for it a lot of the time. There's no lightning strikes that they're playing. They don't play shock typically. And as a result, I'm anticipating that Watanabe is going to get a significant discount on a lot of the cards in his hand. Stuff like Charter Course, just costing 1 mana.
Yeah, I think turn 2 Goblin Electromancer is the ideal start for this deck. This allows you to basically get a huge mana discount on all of your cheap cantrip effects, cards like Charter Course, Discovery, Dispersal, and even Radical Idea.
Rustwing Falcon getting a little bit of a security detail here with Dauntless Bodyguard, and the Legion also making its landing. A 1/1 Vampire coming down, but here is that Charter Course, and what's going to happen here? if Watanabe can discard an Arclight Phoenix, I think he's got one in hand, then this is step 2, Paul.
Yeah, and with that Goblin Electromancer in play, it's extremely likely that he will be able to put the Arclight Phoenix onto the battlefield this turn. He hasn't played a land yet this turn. I believe there's a maximum velocity in his hand as well.
And an opt as well here. So we're going to see Yuuya Watanabe firing on all cylinders with Arclight Phoenix doing its very, very best work, attacking in on turn number 3. Watanabe bottoms a card with opt. He's got to maximize velocity to push through more damage. This is a huge turn.
Yeah, this is a big turn in the sense that he does get a free Arclight Phoenix after playing some cantrip effects. But, I mean, at the end of the day, currently the red-white aggro deck is still putting on a lot more pressure. I think what's actually the more important card, at least in this aggressive matchup, are those Drakes. The Enigma Drake and the Crackling Drake provide an excellent body to block and can finish out games very quickly. The fact that the Drakes have the 4 toughness means that it can basically block any of the relevant threats that the red-white aggro deck can have. Cards like Adanto Vanguard and Benalish Marshal.
So here is the maximized velocity. Going to pump up that Goblin Electromancer and rather needlessly give it haste here. And now Watanabe gets the opportunity to start to crack some skulls. Let's see what these attacks are going to look like. An interesting wrinkle, Paul, and I thank you very much for your work on this card with Arclight Phoenix, is that it can block. This isn't something we typically see from recursive graveyard creatures.
Yeah. This is definitely an Eric Lauer special.
Oh, yeah?
He was the lead designer for Guilds of Ravnica, and I must admit, and I think I had a similar response when I first saw this card in the file. I was like, oh, this card seems okay. How am I going to cast 3 spells, though? That seems pretty hard.
Seems a lot, right?
And then you know, at the end of the day, we were like, wait, there's actually a good amount of cheap cantrip effects in the standard environment. If you build your deck around it, I think this card can do a lot of work.
It's really doing a lot of work, both in Standard and in Modern, of course, where you've got cards like Faithless Looting to really, really go bonkers. Here's a second Legion's Landing, of course. It's going to hit the bin, but still creates a 1/1 and a big attack with the team now.
Ooh, is this a Venerated Loxodon?
Ooh, look at that. No, instead of an attack, he's just going to get all these creatures up into huge fighting shape here. +1/+1 counters on all of them, thanks to the Convoke there. It did look like an attack, but then that last Vampire token kind of gave it away.
So if you just look at what are your thoughts on a 1-mana 4/4 that puts 4 counters on your creatures?
It's pretty good.
1-mana Verdur's Gear Hulk, is that good?
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
No problem.
Back to Watanabe now. Let's see what he's working with. The Crackling Drake in hand, in addition to a bunch of lands. So I think the draw from this Crackling Drake is going to be really important because he can't afford to fall too far behind, especially after this Loxodon.
Absolutely. And one of the cards that I really think is super important right now to kind of prevent yourself from getting flooded is a card like Radical Idea. It gives you multiple spells that you can use to kind of try to fill Arclight Phoenixes into your graveyard, and also you can just throw away a lot of those excess lands. Because this deck does get flooded. It doesn't actually have a lot of hard card draw spells. You don't have effects that let you draw 2 or 3 cards. So, you know, oftentimes, as you're cycling through your deck, you will just run into land pockets.
And this is something we talked about throughout the weekend, the fact that this is a Drake's deck. It has some built-in mechanisms to mitigate flood, you know, discarding them to Charter Core, sort of Radical Idea, maybe surveilling them away with Discovery. But oddly, for a deck that is so full of card draw and velocity, it can, run into problems with mana flood.
Yeah, and so now we're in a situation, as Reed Duke alluded to earlier, it's one of those, well, if they have heroic reinforcements, I'm probably just dead.
He's in a world of pain
here. So let's take a look here.
He's got it. They've always got it.
He's got it, but he does not have land number 4. But his hand is still very, very strong.
Still stacked.
He's got history of Benalia and Conclave Tribunal. So what you can actually choose to do here is play a History of Benalia, you get a token from the History of Benalia, then use a token and 3 other creatures to convoke out Conclave Tribunal to remove that Crackling Drake. Even if he does that, Tay Jun Hao can get a pretty good attack in here.
Looks like Legion's Landing may not be too far away from being flipped if Tay is going to line up some big attacks. Of course, that doesn't help the heroic reinforcement side of things, as it will be the old post-combat heroic reinforcements. That's probably not the agenda this time around. But as you say, chaining History of Benalia into Conclave Tribunal, 7 mana worth of spells with only 3 lands, that's a big game. Yeah,
so based on what I see on the board here, what he can do is play History, tap down to Knight, 2 other tokens, attack with the rest of his creatures. Oh, so he is in an awkward spot here. So he makes History. He has the option to play Tribunal, but if he does, he can't actually flip the Legion's Landing.
Looks like we're just going to see an attack. Oh, no, okay.
No. There's definitely a Tribunal happening here.
Yep, okay, so Tribunal now. Man, Convoke is a tricky one to call sometimes. So there's the Conclave Tribunal, and the Crackling Drake is indeed found guilty.
And now Tay Jun Hao gets a good attack in with 2 of the creatures, and Yuuya is going to need to find a lot of action here. He doesn't really have a good way. I mean, once that Conclave Tribunal is used on the Crackling Drake, Yuuya Watanabe is playing Discovery Dispersal, but he doesn't have Black Mana in his deck, so he doesn't actually have the ability to bounce that Conclave Tribunal.
So just a Lava Coil in hand now for Watanabe, which is going to be able to take down that Loxodon, but right now he has to navigate this combat step at a relatively healthy 17 life. Watanabe, you know, it's not a life or death situation for him, but this is very much setting the pace here. I like the way that Tay Jun Hao is getting on the front foot, swishing around the willow, and making sure that Watanabe really doesn't get too much breathing room.
Right.
So, here are the blocks now for the Japanese superstar. And again, Arclight Phoenix doing something we don't see too often for recursive graveyard creatures, playing a defensive role, cleans up that 3/3 vampire there.
Well, one nice thing about the Phoenix, though, is you can use it defensively. You trade, play some spells, and see, I think there's a very good chance that Yuuya is going to be able to get that Phoenix back onto the battlefield. He just drew Radical Idea. Oh, yeah, so he's locked in to do it because he can play Radical Idea, use the Jumpstart, play it again, play Lava Coil, and that would be 3 spells to trigger the Arclight Phoenix. One thing that would be really nice is if he drew another Arclight Phoenix off this Radical Idea so that he could discard it, but I don't think that's what he found.
Doesn't look like it's happened here as he finds Goblin Electromancer instead. Going to discard a mountain and now finds another mountain off the top. So a little bit of rough stuff here for Watanabe. He's not finding the cards he needs. He's going to be able to take the pressure down a little bit, as you say, with that Lava Coil. But he's got, I mean, half a million lands in hand here. He's got great big tracts of land, and it's not looking good here for Watanabe in terms of his potential to stabilize. So now Lava Coil is going to exile a Venerated Loxodon, but there's still plenty of problems for him to deal with here, Paul.
Right. There's still 4 creatures on the battlefield with the History of Benalia on Chapter 1 and Heroic Reinforcements in Tay Jun Hao's hand.
Man.
He's in a situation right now where if he draws a spell, that's pretty solid here, but if he draws a land, that can just slam the door shut.
And that's the sort of position you always want to be in as a Magic player.
It's the best situation.
It's just the dream, right?
Yeah.
You draw a land, you're like, oh, great. You draw a spell, you're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
So Tay Jun Hao going from strength to strength here, and you can see that Watanabe is really having the hurt put on him here. We'll see what his next move is. It doesn't look like he's got some... I mean, obviously he can attack and get in for damage, but I don't think that's a winning proposition right now.
Right, and the turn where Tay Jun Hao tapped all of his creatures down to cast the Venerated Loxodon was huge because currently Yuuya Watanabe doesn't have efficient blockers on the battlefield. Everything has 2 toughness, but everything on Tay Jun Hao's side also has 2 power.
Yeah, should have made it a 2/3. Thanks, Eric. Anyway, we go back to Tay Jun Hao now. See what he can get cooking this time around. If it's a land off the top, he just can slam that Heroic Reinforcements into play, and that's going to be that. But first of all, History of Benalia, of course, triggers. A second Knight token enters the fray. I think Dauntless Bodyguard, the draw for this turn.
Okay, so Tay Jun Hao next turn will still be able to have a huge turn, as I think he's going to be looking to attack with all of his creatures this turn, flip the Legion's Landing. That would give him access to 4 mana, and then he can either play a Sky Marcher Aspirant or make a 1/1 lifelink token off of Adanto, the First Fort.
So here is the Sky March Aspirant, freshly drawn this turn. And Watanabe counting up exactly what's going on here, and indeed, Tay Jun Hao does ascend. The City's Blessing is upon him.
Right, and so now he's going to be able to get a big attack in. I do think he wants to flip that Legion's Landing to give himself the 4th mana source to cast Heroic Reinforcements next turn. And that means not only does History of Benalia trigger and pump all of his Knights, he'll also get the +1/+1 effect from the Heroic Reinforcements.
So Tay's really going to, the pot is really going to come to the boil next turn with Chef Tay overseeing it, adding those spices in very carefully. We see Adanto, the First Fort, established on the beaches of Ixalan. And now Watanabe has to line up some blocks, and these blocks are not profitable.
Right. He's going to probably want to put his creatures in front of the Knights that are on the battlefield because History of Benalia is currently on Chapter 2. Once we go to Phase 3, all of his Knights get +2/+1 until end of turn.
So, Goblin Electromancer jumps in front of the Knight token, and Dauntless Bodyguard, which is also a Knight, gets taken down by the Arclight Phoenix, a distant familial relation of mine. I don't keep in touch as much as I should, really. It's difficult on the other side of the world, but we will see now if Watanabe can do anything at all to get his snoot back into this one. Off the top, what can he find? Ooh, a Steam Vent. So a real clunker here for Watanabe, and this one might already be in the books.
Yeah, one thing that we've seen from the Izzet Drake stack so far is, sometimes you flood out because you you don't have a way to draw a lot of cards. At the same time, this deck is also extremely capable of having incredible explosive starts or comebacks from situations where it seems like you can't possibly win. All of a sudden, you draw Crackling Drake into maximum velocity and just kill your opponent out of nowhere.
Well, let's see if he can find something miraculous here. It doesn't look like it. Tay is going to go all in on this heroic reinforcements. +1/+1 to the team. And 2 soldiers in addition that also are given haste. And that is going to be enough to go to game number 2. Tay Jun Hao running away with the game in very convincing circumstances. An awkward draw there for Watanabe, Paul, and Tay really able to pounce.
Yeah, so we saw Yuuya. It looked like he had an incredible start there. He did go turn 2 Electromancer, into turn 3, put Arclight Phoenix into Graveyard, and put it onto the battlefield. Then he followed that up with a Crackling Drake. So a very solid start. He even had Lava Coil as an interactive spell. But Tay Jun Hao just had an even more explosive start with Creatures, History of Benalia, and ending the game with that Heroic Reinforcements.
Yeah, really good stuff there from Tay. We'll see if Watanabe can bounce back, but right now, my friends, we're going to go to a break. On the other side of this, we'll be back live from Atlanta with more standard action. Stick around. We'll see you soon.
Countdown, tick, tick, tock. About time we set things up. Here we go, here we go. Get ready for the fight. Here we go, here we go. It's coming. It's coming. Go! Get ready for the fight! Every fight of your life.
Welcome back to the feature match area here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica, live from Atlanta in the USA. My name's Riley Knight, joined by Paul Chan. It's my great pleasure to welcome you back to live coverage of our top 8. The format, of course, is standard. And whether you're an old hand or an up-and-coming new player, you are very, very welcome to our coverage of this event. Yuuya Watanabe and Tay Jun Hao are shuffling up for game number 2. On our back table as well, we've got a couple of names that you need to be aware of in Wilson Mock and Andrew Elenbogen. Now, Paul, we talked about the dominance of White Weenie in this top 8, and once again, we're seeing a red-white aggro deck, a Boros aggro deck in the hands of Andrew Elenbogen, but flying the flag for Teferi mages around the world. Wilson Mock on Jeskai control.
Yeah, actually ended the tournament as the overall first seed. You know, I think the Jeskai control deck is very well positioned if you do play against, if you're expecting a lot of these white aggressive decks. Deafening Clarion is the most important card in the matchup, and it's even possible now that you know the matchup, if your hand is a little bit on the slower side, mulliganing to make sure you have access to that Clarion, because even if you go down a card, oftentimes that Clarion will help, you know, recoup 2 or 3 cards even when you're down.
Take out the trash.
But Andrew actually has a pretty nice resilient hand against specifically Deafening Clarion. He had that Sky Marcher Aspirant followed by the Dauntless Bodyguard, so he only actually lost 1 card in the exchange.
And so as a result, Mock is now on the back foot once again after having lost game number 1. He's down to 16 and doesn't have a great answer to any of the cards in play. In his hand, we can see that he's got Justice Strike, Essence Scatter, and then a couple of powerful card drawing engines. But Paul, he needs to find, once again, something like a Deafening Clarion part 2 here in order to ensure he doesn't fall too far behind.
Yeah, one very nice thing about Wilson Mock's list, I think he definitely tooled it to be better against aggressive decks. Not only does he have a few copies of Revitalize in the main deck with the full 4 Clarions, he's also playing 2 copies of Cleansing Nova. So he has 6 sweepers in his deck, and I think a lot of the reason for that is this specific matchup.
I think I got the chance to have a chat with Wilson previous to this quarterfinal. He was feeling confident. He was feeling good. The young Canadian was ready to get in there and chuck some punches about. And he talked about the matchup that he had against the aggressive deck. And he said he's very pleased to be able to play 2 game ones because of the way his deck has been tooled. But also he's feeling confident that Andrew Elenbogen's sideboard strategy is not well matched up against the control list here. He doesn't have a huge amount of cards to bring in, and Mock, as you say, overloaded with Wrath effects, with removal and what have you. It's just a matter of finding them.
Yeah, he really wants to find a sweeper here. He actually chose to take the damage instead of using Justice Strike to kill one of Elenbogen's creatures here. So he uses the Chemist's Insight just to try and find another copy of Deafening Clarion or Cleansing Nova. Another reasonable option is Crackling Drake. It is a good blocker, but it would only be a 2/4, and History of Benalia is going off next turn, meaning that those 2/2/2 Vigilance Knight tokens on the battlefield will both be attacking as a 4/3, meaning that Wilson Mock will not have a profitable block against those 2 creatures.
Bit of a clunky Chemist's Insight as well, not finding the cards that I think Mock was looking for. I think we're going to see Teferi, the hero of Dominaria, deployed. There he is. Look at this, the big boy from Dominaria. And that may cause Andrew Elenbogen to make, you know, slightly different decisions.
Yeah, so that was a nice draw from Wilson.
Oh, he's found it.
He found a Deafening Clarion. Not only that, I mean, this sequence is very strong coming from Wilson Mock because he can go to Ferry, untap 2 lands, and still have access to Justice Strike to remove one of Andrew Elenbogen's attacking creatures. Now Andrew has to just make a simple decision. Do I want to pressure Teferi, or do I just want to finish the game here? Andrew currently has a lethal attack for 10 damage. 2 4/3 Knight tokens along with that Sky Marcher Aspirant. So it's probably best to go for the win, but Andrew's still just making sure he has all his options here. Ooh.
Benalish Marshall turns up the heat here.
So this also changes things up. Now Andrew Elenbogen is threatening 11 points of damage. Wilson Mock can still, however, survive because he does have a Justice Strike for one of the Knights. So Andrew can get in for a total of 8 damage if Wilson uses a Justice Strike here.
I do not envy Andrew Elenbogen here because he must know he'll have Wilson Mock on a removal spell, right? He'll be saying, okay, I've got to make a really important decision here because if Mock can stabilize, if he can pass this, if he can survive this turn, untap, cast something like a Deafening Clarion, and has a Teferi around, he's going to run away with the game.
So Andrew, again, really trying to figure out what the best attacks are here. So he's choosing to go for an attack which represents lethal damage and is using the Sky Marcher Aspirant to pressure Teferi.
So Justice Strike on one of the Knights means that Mock, of course, lives to fight another day. And I kind of like this from Elenbogen. He found a way to you know, thread the needle at least a little bit, pressuring the Teferi while also putting Wilson Mock to the question. And he's in a Danto Vanguard. That's a really, really good resilient creature here, especially in the face of this incoming Deafening Clarion.
That was a huge follow-up from Andrew Elenbogen. If he didn't play a Danto Vanguard, I think might be the only creature here, maybe also Dauntless Bodyguard, that would actually be able to survive a Deafening Clarion. So Andrew can actually still be providing a decent clock here. I think Wilson Mock doesn't have a choice other than to play Deafening Clarion here to remove the other 3 creatures on the battlefield. And then that means Wilson's going to be taking 3 from that Adanto Vanguard, going down to 2. Alternatively, he can also use the Adanto Vanguard to get rid of that Teferi.
So Deafening Clarion number 2 is going to clear the board, except, of course, for that Adanto Vanguard there, which Elenbogen gives indestructible by paying 4 life. Mock is shipping the turn back to Elenbogen.
I think he forgot to untap 2 lands.
Figure out why 2 of those lands are still tapped here. I mean, it's not going to make a huge difference. The only card he can cast is an Essence Scatter, and Elenbogen picking a great moment there to make sure that he can take that Teferi down.
Right, but I think that was still big because if Andrew Elenbogen doesn't play a creature here, Wilson Mock could have used Chemister's Insight and use the Jumpstart to find more answers.
Oh, right,
and he's got an Essence Scatter, which does not run into the History of Benalia. So I think Wilson, that misstep might end up costing him a lot, as he really wanted to be able to cast that Chemister's Insight to find another sweeper.
Well, he's going to make the best of a bad situation here, casting an Essence Scatter on that Sky Marcher Aspirant here. Back to Mock now. He finds a Sinister Sabotage off the top, but this History of Benalia, once again, unfolding further problems here for the Canadian. Let's see what he can do to try to get himself back in, and I think we're going to see a main phase Chemister's Insight. No, sorry, it's a Crackling Drake. Oh, there we go.
Yep. It's a Crackling Drake, and he has a land in hand, but it's a Sacred Foundry. Now, and he doesn't actually have an additional blue source for the Sinister Sabotage, but he drew an Ionize. It's actually going to be tricky. Wilson Mock now has to make the decision whether or not he wants to play a land untapped here to be able to cast Ionize, because that would protect him from something like a Conclave Tribunal, which would present lethal damage.
So he plays the Sacred Foundry tapped, Paul. That means that the Ionize is off the table. Elenbogen creates a Knight. In his hand, a Plains and a Mystery card. We didn't get a great look at it here. I think it was a second land.
Okay, so at this point, Andrew, it might be in his best interest to just wait a turn and let that History of Benalia go to Chapter 3, because Wilson Mock does have the ability this turn to eat one of the Knights and then go down to 2. And then if Wilson Mock has another removal spell, then Andrew Elenbogen no longer has a good attack. Whereas if he waits a turn and lets History go to the 3rd phase, he will have a lethal attack.
Yeah, he can attack right through that Drake with 4 toughness. It'll have to trade with a Knight token at best, and he'll be in a good position to push through lethal here. You can see Wilson Mock composed. As I said, he was feeling pretty confident, coming into this match. And Elenbogen may be feeling the pressure here. He knows that he's at the point.
Okay.
Okay, here comes an attack.
Yep, damage.
Snaps off the block straight away. Mock takes 3 down to 2.
So Mock still needs to find an answer to one of these creatures, because, right, Andrew still has a lethal attack next turn. So Wilson Mock needs another creature or a removal spell, Teferi, any number of those cards. But currently, all he has are a couple of counter spells, so he needs to figure out what he wants to do here. He has to fire off a Chemister's Insight to either look for a Drake or a removal spell.
So Glacial Fortress, the draw now for Mock. Let's see a main phase Chemister's
this is
Insight.
big.
2 cards off the top. Can he find what he needs, or are we going to go to game number 3?
Revitalize would also work.
We've found a...
Is that a Clarion?
It's another Deafening Clarion.
That is huge.
And of course, he can cast it here to take care of, well, at least the Knight token. But Andrew Elenbogen's got to decide whether he wants to keep this Adanto, this increasingly irrelevant Adanto Vanguard around. Wilson Mock with the timely rips. Paul, we talked about this matchup being dependent on Deafening Clarion.
I mean, yeah, so now he's using both modes of the Deafening Clarion, and this is a combination that we've seen Wilson Mock use in the past. Sweep all of your creatures. I have a giant Crackling Drake on the battlefield. Not only am I going to kill you soon, I'm also swinging the damage race largely in my favor. So look at this now. Wilson Mock just has Andrew Elenbogen dead on the following turn.
I don't think he can do anything. He's got a Sky Marcher Aspirant. It doesn't have flying. Wilson Mock is going to be able to sail across the air into victory here. Draws a negate off the top. A big attack now with the Crackling Drake. And that is that. Deafening Clarion, the hinge upon which this matchup turns, Paul. And Mock able to find 3 copies. And that's what got the job done for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he did overload his deck with those effects. He's got the full 4 copies. On top of that, he does have those Cleansing Novas. But that was an extremely clutch Deafening Clarion there. He had to be fair, a number of cards that he could have played there, but definitely Clarion was definitely the one that basically sealed the deal.
Yeah, put it completely out of contention. Cleansing Nova may have also been helpful. Then he'd have to play more defensive game with the Drake, but ultimately, deafening Clarion, clear the team, gain a bunch of life. Great stuff there from Tay, and they're going to game number 3 at 1-1. We're going to jump back to our front table now. Yuuya Watanabe, the Japanese Hall of Famer, facing off against Tay Jun Hao out of Singapore. We saw Tay get up and about in game number 1, and he's running it right back. Hey, it worked the first time. Rustwing Falcon, turn number 1.
Right, and Yuuya this time with a very different kind of hand here, and I think it's much better suited for this matchup. He's actually just holding 3 Enigma Drakes in hand.
And a shock.
And we were talking about how important those Drakes are in this matchup.
Yeah.
It blocks the flyers. It basically just blocks all the creatures and just threatens lethal. I was actually speaking with Marshall on the way here, talking about how, you know those mono blue decks that people have been playing? It plays Tempest Djinn. Well, this deck gets to play Tempest Djinn and a bunch of removal spells.
Yeah.
Because an Enigma Drake is effectively the same thing. It's a 3-mana, 4 toughness flyer that also just scales into the late game.
And we have seen 4 toughness be the critical number here, holding off Naked Banalish Marshals, holding off, a lot of the red removal spells outside of Lava Coil. And in this situation, an X4 blocker is really well positioned. And sure, the power is going to grow and grow throughout the game, but that it's the toughness that we're really looking at.
The toughness is huge. And I think, at least for this specific Pro Tour, the most important thing is it being able to block Adanto Vanguard, because blue-red decks, Izzet decks, just have a very difficult time dealing with that creature.
That's very true. I mean, in white, we have access to exile-based removal in black as well. But yeah, the Adanto Vanguard can really put the hurt on the blue-red decks here. And having a creature that can just block it with impunity is really important. Rustwing Falcon gets struck down with a shock. But here's History of Benalia, a really good follow-up for Tay here.
Yeah. And Tay attacking first prior to playing the History of Benalia, because if Yuuya did know that the History was coming, he would have probably fired off the shock on one of the Knight tokens.
But an Enigma Drake is a nice defensive option here for Yuuya Watanabe. Just a 3-mana, 3/4 flyer.
Yeah. Pretty reasonable.
Pretty reasonable, you'd have to say. Back to Tay now, who triggers the 2nd chapter of History of Benalia.
Oh, look at Tay's hand.
Oh,
Just all the pump effects here. I mean, this is that combination. Just the white Winnie decks just have kind of just the premier 3-mana creatures in the format. You have History of Benalia along with Banalish Marshal, and don't leave home without him. Get the full 4 copies in there, and not only that, he's got Venerated Loxodon to just continue to just make all of his creatures gigantic.
and this is going to be very problematic for Watanabe, who we talked about the fact that the 4 toughness of the Enigma Drake is really important, but Tay Jun Hao is doing a great job of mitigating that importance by pushing his smaller creatures above 4 power.
Yeah, and Tay at this point has considering whether or not he wants to either play Banalish Marshal or the Venerated Loxodon, but choosing to go with the Marshal here.
I like this move because, of course, Banalish Marshal also a member of the Knight tribe, which means that History of Benalia will benefit it as well with +2/+1. So Tay in a position to unload an enormous amount of damage next turn, and let's see what kind of damage control Yuuya Watanabe can conjure up this turn.
Right, and now, Yuuya Watanabe actually did not have mana for shock, so he couldn't kill one of those knights, and now the Banalish Marshal the Banalish Marshal's protecting those knight tokens from the shock that's sitting in Yuuya's hand. So next turn, Tay's going to be able to get in for a gigantic amount of damage.
Watanabe is holding 3 more copies of Enigma Drake. He's got the full 4.
He does have the full 4, but they might just be chump blocking.
This is the thing. I mean, these knights are going to be so huge thanks to the 3rd chapter of history here that the ordinarily robust 4 toughness of an Enigma Drake is going to look exceedingly irrelevant here.
They're currently 5/4s, and Tay Jun Hao has another Banalish Marshal in hand, meaning that they're going to be the Knight tokens by themselves are 6/5s.
Attacking for 6 points each. This is crazy here.
And the Banalish Marshal on top of that. Tay Jun Hao actually can attack for 18 if he wants, if he plays the other Banalish Marshal in his hand.
Now, because of the high power of the Enigma Drakes, Paul, that does mean that because it's only +2/+1 granted by the History of Benalia, that means they'd be trading, right?
Right. So Yuuya Watanabe, he can choose to double block one of the creatures to get rid of them, but currently those Enigma Drakes are only 4/4, so a single block won't even be able to kill one of the creatures in play.
Yeah, right. So the there's
Oh
not even
my goodness!
and
This
a
is
Dauntless Bodyguard as
Dauntless
well.
Bodyguard. So now Tay Jun Hao can attack freely with all 3 of his creatures for 18 damage this turn.
Yeah, this is huge. This is huge. Knight Tribal getting it done in the feature match era. I couldn't be happier, ladies and gentlemen, as we see Tay Jun Hao going from strength to strength against the Japanese Hall of Famer. He's just got it all here, and I don't know how Watanabe is going to be able to line up
Oh
some
my
profitable
goodness!
blocks here.
Look at this. Not only that, if Yuuya Watanabe doesn't chooses not to block here, Tay Jun Hao can now follow this up with also playing a Venerated Loxodon as his final card in hand.
Oh, because of course, because the other knights are Vigilance,
Right.
of course, right? What a turn for Tay Jun Hao! I tell you what, he is just getting it done. And again, it's great to see such success coming his way after a couple of devastating losses in previous Pro Tours, getting so close to the top 8, Paul. But I tell you, he's making the most of every minute of it right now.
So now this isn't actually lethal damage if Yuuya's at 19. I wonder if Yuuya's thinking, is there some combination of draws where I can just win the game with these 2 Drakes next turn? You know, Discovery, Dispersal, put 2 spells in my yard, hit another one, put 2 more spells in my yard. But
Maximize velocity on another Drake or something dumb like that, yeah.
Looks like he's opting not to do that. And by the way, this does prevent Tay Jun Hao from still being able to play that Venerated Loxodon if he so chooses, if he wants to sack the Bodyguard, but he's not.
No.
He's going to let it die and just play this Loxodon.
Yep, I think that's a great move here. Tay Jun Hao knows that he doesn't have to do much in the way of defense.
Oh
he
my
can play
goodness.
this big elephant, get some +1/+1 counters on the team, and next turn, Watanabe is just in a world of pain. We may be going to game number 3 very quickly here, unless the Hall of Famer can pull something out of thin air. His hand, double Enigma Drake, Shock Radical Idea, but even that Shock has just been rendered almost obsolete.
I also just want to point out that it's not like Yuuya Watanabe has had bad draws in these games.
No.
He's had a mix of cantrip spells, shock, and a bunch of Enigma Drakes, which we talked about as being very, very good blockers in this matchup. Tay Jun Hao just has had one of the best possible starts for his red-white aggro deck.
It's been a decisive pummeling here from Tay Jun Hao as he's really put Yuuya Watanabe to the question. And you can see Watanabe is just there. The cogs are turning, but I just don't think there's enough grease on him to get the machinery to tick out a solution here.
Yeah, just I mean, look at just the sheer amount of power that's on Tay Jun Hao's side. We got 5 from the Venerated Loxodon, 4 on the Knight tokens, 4 on the Dauntless Bodyguard, and 4 from the Benelished Marshal.
Sitting pretty, this young man from Singapore. He knows that he is just edging ever closer here to a win against one of the greatest players of all time, the 20th ranked player, Yuuya Watanabe, Hall of Famer, as we say, in I think he's 5th or 6th Pro Tour top 8.
Yeah, he has quite the resume. I believe
Numbers are really hard, and he's getting to the point where I'm starting to lose count. And right now, really going through the motions, trying to figure out if there is a way for him to move forward here. But Paul, if there is, I don't see it.
Yeah, he is just way too light on resources. And that's the thing. Another thing with this red-white aggro deck, with the Convoke mechanic out of Guilds of Ravnica, Tay Jun Hao has been able to double spell a few times during this match by being able to play creatures, follow that up with another creature, and basically, you know, save a bunch of mana by tapping those creatures. Anytime you play a 1-mana card into a Convoke card, it kind of feels like you're cheating a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
You know what I mean? Because you're basically just playing, you're playing that big card that you had in hand for free.
But this is the same with any cost reduction mechanic, whether it's whether it's Delve or or anything like that. I mean, Hollow One in Modern, anything that enables you to play cards for cheaper than the printed cost are always worth a look. And Venerated Loxodon has slotted right into standard in these Go White decks, both Selesnya and Boros here. We see now Radical Idea from Yuuya Watanabe. He cannot find what he needs. We're going to game number 3 with Tay Jun Hao out of Singapore, a 2-0 lead against Watanabe. Paul, he is in a truly dominant position here, and things are looking very good for him. If he wins one more game, he's our first semi-finalist.
Yeah, and one thing, BDM actually had a chance to talk with Tay Jun Hao prior to this match.
Oh,
I was wondering, how do you feel about this matchup? He's like, I feel really good about this because, first of all, I think this is a good matchup. And on top of that, most of the blue-red Drake decks have been playing copies of Fiery Cannonade on the sideboard, which is a very scary card when you are playing this red-white aggro deck. And Yuuya Watanabe, because he's relying on Goblin Electromancer to turn on all of his cards, opted not to play that card in his sideboard, so he doesn't have to play around the sweeper. He can just play the same game of just overloading the board like he did in games 1 and 2, and really there's not a whole lot that Yuuya can do about it.
I think one of the important things that changes post board, for these white decks is their ability to go all in on the board, right? To overcommit, and it's going to be a rare luxury for Tay here to be able to just say, hey, I don't have to change my game plan. I'm just going to spew creatures onto the board until you're dead, and that's going to be that.
He can just do exactly the same thing and not have to worry. In fact, I don't even think he's going to sideboard in very many cards in this matchup because he doesn't have to worry about sweepers. Not only that, not only does he not have to worry about this, he doesn't have to change his strategy at all. And we've seen that these aggressive decks are one of the best game 1 decks in the format.
Looks like we're going to jump back to our back table here with Wilson Mock and Andrew Elenbogen. And Mock, once again, has peeled the perfect 5. You never want to mulligan to 5, but I tell you what, if you do, Deafening Clarion 3 lands is a great place to start here.
But I think Wilson has also identified that he needs to have that Deafening Clarion in hand. One of the most important cards in this matchup is Deafening Clarion, and as a result, if his hand looks a little bit clunky, he's probably going to mulligan it to make sure he has that opportunity to get that Deafening Clarion. But on Andrew Elenbogen's side, one of the scariest cards in the matchup for almost any deck is the Adanto Vanguard, the premier 2-mana aggressive creature in the format.
We're going to see a crazy 1-2-3 curve out here from Elenbogen, but I think Mock is sitting on something here in order to stem the bleeding a little bit. Not only Deafening Clarion, but Revitalize as well. If there's a negate in his hand, this turn 3 History of Benalia is going to look very, very silly, and Mock will be able to really take some of the wind out of the sails of Andrew Elenbogen.
Yeah, so Andrew with just that ideal start here, 1-drop into the Adanto Vanguard into history. So this is basically, if you can sculpt your hand, that's what you want. But Wilson Mock with the negate, he has the negate in there still for History of Benalia.
Yep, for that exact card.
And on top of that, after sideboard, Andrew Elenbogen has some Experimental Frenzies in the board, and that's another card that can run away with the game. So he wants to make sure that he has some cheap counter magic to deal with that card.
Mock recognizing that the time now is not opportune for that Deafening Clarion. He's going to save it for a rainy day here. But keeping that History of Benalia off the battlefield has just saved him 10 or so lives. So we'll be very, very happy with that. Back to Elenbogen now. Let's see what he's got cooking this time around. His Legion's landing. 1-1 Vampire joins the party here. Elenbogen getting closer towards garnering that elusive City's Blessing.
Yeah, one of the really important things that Wilson needs to do within the next few turns is try to find an answer for that Adanto Vanguard. Now, he does have a couple of copies of Seal Away in his sideboard, which is very, very important. But also, Crackling Drake. Again, a large 4 toughness creature just to get in the way of that Adanto Vanguard.
Other options from Wilson's board include things like Lyra Dawnbringer and, of course, Invoke the Divine, a critical card against Experimental Frenzy. Here's a Venerated Loxodon, however, going to make the team just a little bit bigger for Andrew Elenbogen, who takes a turn off, I suppose you could say, in order to add a little bit to the board. The 4/4 Venerated Loxodon could be a bit of an issue here for Mock, given that Deafening Clarion only does 3. So he's going to cycle away a Revitalize, get a little bit more information here.
Yeah, and that was also a big question kind of coming into this tournament, whether or not these white aggressive decks would be playing the Venerated Loxodon. It is not a card that is universally played because some people would go, this is a little bit awkward. I have to take a turn off to actually not attack with my creatures to put counters on them. And some players decided that that wasn't actually worth it. But, so far, Andrew Elenbogen and Tay Jun Hao deciding that it is, in fact, worth it to play this creature that pumps your entire team and is just a large body by itself.
So Mock now, I talked about his confidence heading into this matchup, especially post-board, given the fact that Elenbogen's deck isn't really tooled to go up against control. Of course, Experimental Frenzy, Banefire, great options for him there, but the Canadian's sitting pretty with a pre-board pretty strong game against aggro, and it doesn't get too much worse post-board as well. Here is Deafening Clarion, gets the broom out of the cupboard and sweeps away the rubbish, away that go those 2 creatures. But still, 7 power on the battlefield here for Mock to contend with, and he's going to take a bit of a pasting this turn.
Yeah, this is actually 8 damage because there's a counter on that Adanto Vanguard.
Oh, excuse me, of course.
So that's actually a 2-turn clock. So Wilson does need to find another sweeper here. He needs to find some removal effects.
And another deafening clarion.
That's not going to do it. Not against this board.
I mean, one of Wilson Mock's core strengths, I think one of his greatest strengths in playing Jeskai Control, is that he is very, very good at drawing deafening clarion. That skill, however,
Keys to the matchup.
is not universally useful here.
Right.
And we're seeing the downside of it, of course, with Adanto Vanguard not having much to say about it. And Wilson Mock does have a seal away. That is a critical step here for him to, in order to get rid of that Adanto Vanguard.
Yeah, but Andrew Wilson Mock still down to 4 life here, meaning that the Loxodon is still problematic, and Wilson Mock still needs to find an answer. He's got that deafening clarion, but not going to be doing it here. Andrew Elenbogen now deciding whether or not he wants to play the Sky Marcher Aspirant into a potential Cleansing Nova. So that's what he's thinking about here, instead of just choosing to play that creature out right away. Still might be correct if he wants to play around, like, if he wants to play around maybe a singular removal spell that Wilson Mock could have, like a Justice Strike or a Seal Away.
Now, in hand here for Andrew Elenbogen, Sky Marcher Aspirant Conclave Tribunal.
Yeah, so again, Andrew very, very concerned about a potential...
So it's going to be the Tribunal
Sweeper.
here. I think he's going to go after the Seal Away.
Yeah, so yeah, this is actually very, very heads up, very strong. He can do this, and he might actually choose just not to play the Aspirant.
No, it
Or,
looks like
okay, getting aggro,
Just
getting
going to
aggro.
shove, get it done, get him in there, get him dead. Let's see what Mock can do about this here now with the City's Blessing bestowed upon Andrew Elenbogen.
Well,
He is indeed hashtag blessed.
Wilson
Let's
Mock-
see what's up.
He needs a Cleansing Nova.
Oh, he's going to give us the Yam Wing Chun squeeze. I love it. Wilson Mock. What have you got, my friend?
He needs Cleansing Nova, which would wipe the board. It would still leave the Adanto Vanguard on the battlefield, but it would mean that he would stay alive.
I can see something, a little Angel's Wing, is it? No, I don't think it is.
If he goes double Deafening Clarion,
4 mana
What do you
now.
think?
Is it a Drake? It's a Crackling Drake.
Okay,
So a
it's a
Dragon's
Drake.
Wing rather than an Angel's Wing. Does that help him
he
at all,
still needs a
Paul?
removal spell here to stay alive.
Can he find it again? We're getting the double squeeze here. But I don't think Mock, he's not slamming anything into play. We know that Deafening Clarion is one of the cards. We didn't get a great look at the other one. Oh, the tension, the drama, the excitement here in the feature match area. What has he got? Can he keep himself alive?
The absolute perfect card in this spot would be Justice Strike. Then he could use the Justice Strike to deal with the Loxodon, block the Sky Marcher Aspirant, and go down to 1.
Has he got it? I tell you what, the sweat is so real. Those 2 cards face down. One of them is Deafening Clarion. What is the second? Is it another Crackling Drake, perhaps? He's just going to pass the turn. He doesn't have anything else to do here. So Andrew Elenbogen poised to take this third game.
And Andrew will actually know prior to his attack whether or not Wilson Mock has a Justice Strike, as Andrew Elenbogen has a Legion's Landing in play. So Wilson Mock does not want Andrew to flip Legion's Landing. So if Wilson Mock doesn't use a removal spell prior to attacks, you can at least rule out Justice Strike. That doesn't mean he can't have the 1 Shivan Fire in his sideboard. There's also the second Seal Away that Wilson Mock could have, but at least he could eliminate the possibility of Justice Strike in Wilson's hand.
So, Elenbogen, little flick of the wrist there going, well, what could it be? What could he have? I'm just going to shove. Get in there. 3 attackers, flips the Legion's Landing. Wilson Mock says, sure, you got it, my friend. And now is the time. Mock must take action. He blocks the Adanto Vanguard. Is there an answer to the
Does he have a
Loxodon
Seal
in
Away?
his hand? Does he have a Justice Strike? Does he have a Seal Away? He does not. We're going to game number 4, I should say, and Andrew Elenbogen picks up his second win. He, as well, Paul, is just 1 win away from a semi-final berth here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. Mock just a little bit behind the 8 ball there. A mulligan to 5 didn't treat him particularly well, even with that Deafening Clarion. And I'll tell you what, it was a Adanto Vanguard that really flew the flag there for the white aggro deck.
Right. So if you notice, there is still a little bit of resilience that the white decks can play. History of Benalia produces multiple tokens. You have a Adanto Vanguard that's really which is extremely difficult to deal with, and you even have cards like Dauntless Bodyguard, which help against sweepers. So I can definitely see a world where this Jeskai deck switches up its removal suite
I think so.
and plays more copies of Seal away in the main deck, for example, to deal with those Adanto Vanguards.
I think the other card that the format has really moved away from that we may see people move back towards is Settle the Wreckage.
Right. Another card that I've seen some players play, you know, if you choose to play black, for example, Moment of Craving has been a very, very nice, clean answer to those Adanto Vanguards.
We move back now to our front table. Yuuya Watanabe and Tay Jun Hao. Certainly some lessons to take away from our previous game there in terms of how you want to tool your aggro decks to attack the future standard format, which is very much underway and very much under development here. At this Pro Tour, we've seen a remarkable amount of diversity, not just with the the macro archetypes, but sub-archetypes, micro-archetypes. Still no consensus best build of more or less any deck in the format.
Yeah, we've seen various flavors of Boros. We've seen Selesnya tokens. We've seen Selesnya mid-range. You know, we've seen a lot of different decks within the guilds.
So Yuuya Watanabe firing off some early spells to keep the board clear with a shock-removing Rustwing Falcon. Adanto Vanguard, the play now for Tay Jun Hao, but a Drake is the perfect way to keep the Vanguard at bay here.
But if Tay follows it up with a Banalish Marshal again, then Yuuya would not be able to block.
So, Tay now pauses for thought, in hand Banalish Marshal, and looks like he's got another Plains in order to deploy it. And with a handful of 1-drops, a Walking Talking Crusade effect is just the perfect bit of parsley on top of your bowl of pasta.
The reason why Tay is tanking here is his other play is to play 3 1-mana creatures, and next turn he can actually just deploy the Banalish Marshal and have a huge force that can all attack at the same time. The problem is, even if he plays cards like the Sky Marcher Aspirant, there's still only going to be 3/2s in the face of that Enigma Drake, which will just eat them up.
Yep. So a tricky decision here for Tay. I mean, not a bad decision, not a tricky decision in the sense that he's starting to fall behind, but still, he does have to tread carefully here because this will very much set the pace in the coming turns. A second Adanto Vanguard is going to be joined by another 1-drop here, and this is good stuff. This means he's got a pair of resilient, sticky attackers that can get through that Enigma Drake next turn.
Right.
Back to Watanabe now, who does seem a little outgunned here, Paul, I think I have to say. You know, no Fiery Cannonade, not many great answers to aggressive creatures like Adanto Vanguard, and I think Watanabe is just not in a great position to hustle and bustle.
I see a nice sideboard tech card in his
hello.
hand. There's a Murmuring Mystic in Yuya's hand. He does need to get to land number 4, but Murmuring Mystic is fantastic in this specific matchup, as the red-white aggro deck just doesn't have a lot of removal spells. So you can really, you know, this is a deck that can play 2, 3, 4 spells in a turn, and you can really amass a huge army of blockers.
Plus a 1/5 body as well.
Right.
Oh, young Flyromancer getting it done absolutely here, and it's great that Watanabe has found the single copy of that card in his list. Let's see if he can put it to any use here. Tay Jun Hao has got to strike while the iron is hot. He can line up some very profitable attacks this turn, and Watanabe will be forced to take a more defensive posture. But I guess he knows that coming in, right? He knows that he is not the aggressor.
Right. I think this is the turn where you want to play out that Banalish Marshal and get in for an attack for 8 off those Adanto Vanguards. The only thing that Tay might be concerned about, though, is sure, he gets an attack in for 8 this turn, but if Yuuya Watanabe follows that up with a removal spell on the Banalish Marshal, then he can't do anything on the following turn. So he's actually looking to play it kind of slow here and playing that history of Benalia here first.
Just going to whack the pork on the old slow roast here instead of trying to fire up the oven to full heat. And let's see what Watanabe's next move is. Looks like it's going to be Charter Course. He may be lacking lands by the look of things, but he finds a Sulphur Falls. So after having discarded a card, he'll be able to move on with this turn.
Yeah, and Tay does have to be careful too. Yuuya does have the ability to fill his graveyard up very, very quickly. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, these 2 Enigma Drakes could just be lethal.
So in hand, Crackling Drake may be the prime candidate for discarding here. Goblin Electromancer also another option. I don't think Watanabe is going to want to get rid of the Murmuring Mystic, of course, given its defensive applications.
Yeah, so if he, for example, sets up this turn by playing Goblin Electromancer, next turn he could go something like Murmuring Mystic into Charter Course. But he could also maybe just choose to discard the Electromancer because the rest of his hand is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's not an easy decision to make here. I think safe from the axe, obviously the Sulphur Falls, that's sticking around. Shock still can do some good work in this matchup. Charter Course, again, a great way to continue to trigger that Murmuring Mystic, which I think will stay. So in my mind, it's between the Goblin Electromancer and the Crackling Drake. However, between Yuuya Watanabe, Tay Jun Hao, you, and me, I'm certainly the worst. Not by much, but definitely the least. I'm going to make the least best decision in default.
I could maybe see that. And I would also guess that Yuuya would likely make the best one.
That's probably an accurate statement as well. So we're going to leave it in his very capable hands here, Paul. It looks like it's going to be the Crackling Drake. I mean, we're defaulting on the side of that being the right call, but what do you make of this decision?
I think it's extremely close. Yuuya has, of course, the most experience playing this style of deck, and I think he determined that the Murmuring Mystic is the more important, expensive creature to have, and he's pretty close to closing the game away with the 2 Drakes that he already has on the battlefield. So the Murmuring Mystic is a much better defensive option, as if he draws a land next turn, he can play Murmuring Mystic Shock and make it so that he won't actually die, and then he can also get in a good attacks with those Enigma Drakes.
So when you're talking about these Drakes being able to close out the game, you don't mean in terms of them holding down the fort or anything. You mean actually just them getting in the air and attacking twice to
just win. Actually winning the game with them. They're currently sitting at 3-4. No.
Yeah, 3-4s. Yep.
3-4s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yuuya Watanabe has a very helpful habit of separating the instants and sorceries and the non-instants and sorceries in his bin.
Oh, we also have, of course, the number of instants and sorceries in graveyard counter there with the die, which says 3.
Yes, indeed.
Ooh, and look at this.
So in comes a 3-4 flyer. It's going to be followed up by a 2-2 Goblin Electromancer. An aggressive posture taken by Watanabe. Surprising little turn of events here. But once again, I trust him to make the best decisions. This guy's a stone cold killer, and he's going to get it done one way or the other. Back to Tay Jun Hao now. Ticks up the copy of History of Benalia to chapter number 2. And, his draws have just been busted. Let's have a look at his hand here. Benalish Marshal, Healer's Hawk, Sky Marcher Aspirant. He's going wide in style, Paul.
Right. So now he also just drew another 1-mana card in Legion's Landing. So he has a couple of options here. He can either play all the 1-drops in his hand and go for a very big attack next turn by playing the Benalish Marshal, or he can just run out the Marshal this turn. The advantages of playing the Marshal out this turn is that he gets a good attack this turn. On top of that, it is a Knight, which would then mean that it gets pumped next turn when History of Benalia goes to Chapter 3.
And this is that wombo combo we've seen time and time again. We're going to get in now with the Adanto Vanguards, both of them as 4-2s now, thanks to Benalish Marshal's pump effect.
Ooh, and I can see Yuuya just blocking the Danto Vanguard with a Goblin Electromancer. Because if he does that, Tay Jun Hao, if he chooses to pay 4 life, those Enigma Drakes can be lethal.
Yeah, very, very quickly indeed. Watanabe with the 200 IQ plays, making sure that Tay's life total is going to be eroded one way or the other. He's having a think about it here. And of course, History of Benalia's trigger next turn, as you mentioned, going to unload damage, not just with those Knight tokens there, but also the Benalish Marshal being a beneficiary of the +2/+1.
Does Tay Jun Hao have a Sky Marcher Aspirant in play?
He's got one in hand. Does he have one in play? Yes, he does.
He does, because he does have the City's Blessing. So the Sky Marcher Aspirant does fly. So if Yuuya wants to go for example, a lethal attack next turn, he does need to fire off the shock at the Sky Marcher Aspirant. But it looks like he's just taking the damage.
Looks like he's going to take the 8. Yes, indeed. So down to 10. Tay on 17. Watanabe this turn, it's his opportunity to really fire off some burn spells and see what he can get done. Another shock off the top here, Paul, as well. Okay. Can he take enough pressure down?
He needs to get the ball rolling here. So he's got that Electromancer in play, and he really wants to just string together a ton of spells here.
Oh, here's an Arclight Phoenix. That's a great discard now for the Charter Course. Double shock in hand for Watanabe. He can bring back the 3/2.
Oh, I think he sees it. He's playing really quickly right now.
Look at this. We see spell number 2 now with shock.
He's going to shock the Aspirant for blockers. Is this just going to be a lethal attack?
Is he going to be able to push through a lethal attack out of nowhere here and get himself on the board? Another shock is going to bring back a Sky Marcher Aspirant. It's going
exactly
upstairs.
Lethal. The Enigma Drakes have 6 power. This
oh
is
my goodness me. 400 IQ plays here from Yuuya Watanabe. That attack with the Enigma Drake last turn, and now 3 flyers getting it done. Tay Jun Hao on 17 life when this turn started. He is reading them and weeping. He cannot believe it.
What just happened?
Yuuya Watanabe, a powerful sorcerer. How did he get that done?
I mean, the thing with this deck is it is capable of turns like this. When you untap with an Goblin Electromancer and you do have some card filtering in your hand, Yuuya could have found any combination of Drake plus maximize velocity, finding Arclight Phoenix, putting into your graveyard, multiple burn spells, or just putting a bunch of spells and putting them into the graveyard so you can get a big enough Drake. But that was a huge explosive turn, and this is what makes, this Izzet deck very, very fun to watch.
Oh, and incredibly scary as well, right? Tays, they're like, okay, I can play this one drop, get my, pump the team with my Banalish Marshal, I attack with this, that sort of stuff. But we saw Watanabe was light years ahead. He attacked with that Enigma Drake, knowing just the one, so he knew, he had to chip away at the life total. He's running the numbers, figuring it out, finds the extra shock, clears away the blocker, and out of nowhere.
And that was really the key.
Yeah.
Most people in a situation where you're playing against this white aggressive deck and they have a gigantic board might not have attacked with that Enigma Drake, just thinking to play defense. But Yuuya thinking, you know what? I need to win this game soon. Tay Jun Hao has plenty of ways to pump up his squad. That history is going to go off soon. I need to get him low enough to put myself in a position so that my Drakes can be lethal, and that's exactly what he did.
That's exactly what they did with that Goblin Electromancer double shock play as well. So we move on now to game number 4 between those players, as well as game number 4 between Wilson Mock and Andrew Elenbogen. Elenbogen sitting pretty on 2 wins. Mock's going to have to really rally here. His deck's set up well to do it. Let's see if he can deliver.
This is the classic Deafening Clarion check.
Oh, yeah, look at this.
If Wilson Mock has a Clarion, it's going to be huge. This tells us that he, in fact, probably doesn't have a Clarion.
Nope. Lava Coil in hand is another removal spell, a pair of Crackling Drakes, and a Teferi for the Canadian.
And Wilson Mock definitely wanted to use that Shivan Fire as he wants to prevent Andrew from flipping that Legion's landing. Give him some of that mana acceleration.
Elenbogen's hand is a bit of a stinker here, Paul. Double Conclave, single Conclave Tribunal and a Venerated Loxodon fresh off the top. That's going to help a little bit here, but this has not been the ridiculous.
It's not as explosive, but we talk about, hey, this hand wasn't so explosive. Turn 3, he put 6 power on the battle.
I guess, okay, all right. Let's keep things in perspective. It is still pretty good, but a Lava Coil to remove that Venerated Loxodon's a great move here for Mock. He talked about his sideboard plan with me before the game, and he was saying he anticipated that Snubhorn Sentry would be coming out post board, and instead Elenbogen would leave in cards like Healer's Hawk. I'm interested now to know how Mock is responding to the fact that he was a little bit off base with what his anticipation of Elenbogen's post-board plan was, and how he's going to modify his game to adapt to that.
Yeah, well, some of the upside of having something like a Snubhorn Sentry is that it does have the potential to be a 3/3, and in conjunction with cards like Venerated Loxodon and the Banalish Marshal, that would give it 4 power, meaning that it could potentially attack through cards like the Crackling Drake that we've seen. Also, if you do manage to put a counter on it through Venerated Loxodon, it does survive cards like Deafening Clarion.
That's the other thing as well. We talk about 4 being the magic number when it comes to power for the white aggressive decks, but it's also a magic number when it comes to toughness, as it can survive that cheap sweeper. Here is a Conclave Tribunal now, getting rid of that Crackling Drake, enabling an attack now.
This game isn't as pretty, but Andrew's still putting on some pressure here. 3 damage a turn, but Wilson is okay with this. We've seen previous games where Andrew's attacking in for 12 on turn 4 or 5, so he's perfectly happy with just taking 3 a turn, still at a healthy 13 life. And being at 13 life against an aggressive deck with all those cards in hand, you got to be feeling pretty good.
So in hand now for Mock. Let's have a look. Crackling Drake, Hero of Dominaria, 2 top-end threats. And here is the Hero of Dominaria. I like this a lot. Untapping 2 lands will turn on both the Ionize and the Sinister Sabotage in Mock's hand. And he doesn't miss a trick this time
but keep in mind here, we are close to being ascended. Currently, with that Conclave Tribunal, there are 9 permanents on the battlefield. He now is ascended. That Snubhorn Sentry is a 4/4.
All of a sudden.
So Andrew now has an attack that can actually remove that Teferi on the battlefield.
I think he's going to want to take that as well, Paul.
Snubhorn Sentry. We saw this played in the Player of the Year race with Luis Salvato, I believe, playing it, and we were calling it the mild Nakatl.
Yeah.
As it is a 1-mana 0/3, but eventually becomes a 1-mana 3/3 creature.
It gets, it has to build up the head of steam, right?
Right.
It
needs to get the momentum
It needs to get the momentum. It's very calm to begin with, but eventually, you start poking it with enough sticks and there's going to be trouble. So Elenbogen now considering an attack. By the way, mild Nakatl, wild Nakatl. Do you know what the German translation of wild Nakatl is?
Oh yeah, I do.
Wilder Nakatl. They make him a lot more wild over there in Germany, I'll tell you that.
So I guess Andrew deciding whether or not how he wants to end this game, but I think he's probably going to want to attack the Teferi here.
Yeah, just get it off the board. I mean, if you've ever got the opportunity to remove a Teferi, you should take it because this card is a stone cold powerhouse. And Elenbogen jumps at the chance. Away goes Teferi.
Yeah, and I'm not, that's the thing. Wilson expected the Snubhorn Sentry to be sideboarded out, but it is doing some work here.
Really doing some work. Yep.
I mean, extra counter on it. Now Wilson Mock in hand has a Crackling Drake too, which is currently a 2/4. So Wilson can't even get a good block next turn, even if he does play the Crackling Drake.
Jeez, his face is giving a little away. He doesn't look too pleased. I think this is going to eat a counterspell straight away.
Look at this, just a straight 5 mana 4/4.
Yeah.
He's like, you know what? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm. But no, it eats a Sinister Sabotage, and that puts a land in the bin. So Mock may be able to filter through some of the garbage. I think he's found another Crackling Drake here, Paul.
Yeah, so he's found another Crackling Drake. Currently, though, the Crackling Drake's still only 3/4s, so he's going to have to take damage from the Snubhorn Sentry until he finds another spell to put into his graveyard.
So here is Crackling Drake, number 2. Going to draw a card. Let's see if he can find something.
Well,
I
like the slow.
Oh, I love the squeeze. I love the squeeze. It's Mark Latham all over again. It's just, he's not going to ease the squeeze.
Wilson knows drama.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we saw it from Yan Wing Chun, the master of the squeeze, and now we're seeing it from an Acolyte in Wilson Mock. So 3 mana available, does turn on that Ionize. I think double Ionize in hand now for Mock.
I thought there was another Crackling Drake. But
He's got Crackling Drake double Ionize in hand.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Snubhorn Sentry gets in, old Snubby. Getting the job done, but Elenbogen, nothing doing. He plays a land and passes the turn. Let's see if Mock now can jump at this chance. He is still under a little bit of pressure with the Snubhorn Sentry.
And Wilson Mock just drew a card that we've seen do some serious work already in one of the feature matches. I believe he's drawn an Invoke the Divine.
Oh, here we go.
And he has that same play. He can use Invoke the Divine to remove Conclave Tribunal, get back his Crackling Drake, draw a card, and guess what? They're both going to be 4/4s.
And he is selling it. Look at this. The Oscar goes to Wilson Mock. He looks like a very unhappy chappy here. But this is going to be a huge play. Not only does he get to draw a card with the Invoke the Divine, not only does he gain 4 life, which is crucial in these aggro matchups, he's also going to be able to line up some very good blocks against whatever Elenbogen chucks.
Yeah, I think the thing he's considering is whether or not he wants to be more aggressive. He can now just choose to attack. But he also has Counter Magic in hand. He has the double Ionizes in hand. So he was determining whether or not he wants to play out a Crackling Drake. The other option that he could have used is keep all of his mana up, just pass. Andrew Elenbogen is likely going to attack. You use Invoke the Divine, block with your Crackling Drake, and then have Counterspell backup on top of that. By playing the Crackling Drake on this turn, your mana is a little more tied up, but Wilson Mock can just choose to run the double block here to deal with that Snubhorn Sentry.
And save
save the Invoke the Divine and still keep up counter magic.
Yeah, I mean, there are a range of options here that are enabled by these instant speed plays. Here's a Legion's Landing. I don't think Mock's going to care too much about this.
Right.
That's going to ease the pressure for him. I think he knows that Elenbogen isn't holding a lot of action, just a planes in hand for him here. And so that means that Mock, I think, really is starting to take firm control of this game.
Well, yeah, Wilson Mock is going to play Invoke the Divine. He's going to have 3 4/4 Crackling Drakes on the battlefield. He's going to be up additional cards, and he's holding 2 counter spells.
So now, 3 mana, Invoke the Divine, get this Conclave Tribunal back. And this is going to be huge now because another Crackling Drake. And look, Elenbogen, full credit to Elenbogen, not walking into anything here.
Right.
Not making any questionable attacks. And Mock now sitting pretty. He's got 500,000 cards in hand.
Yeah, and keep that life gain also extremely relevant, of course, in this matchup. And now I think Wilson's in a position where he can actually at least attack with one of the Drakes, if not 2.
I mean, he's got an Ixalan's Binding in hand that he's just drawn. Double Ionize as well, putting him in a great spot. It's going to be very hard for Elenbogen to get himself back in this one. The pitfall of playing a lot of counter magic is when you're behind, it does a very bad job a lot of the time of getting you back ahead, right? It can stop you from falling further behind, but it's not a proactive way to get yourself back into the game. Here, however, Mock, in firm control, knows that the top of Andrew Elenbogen's library is not going to be a threat to him.
I think Mock right now wants to play this aggressive and try to end the game as quickly as possible. If he drew Ixalan's Binding, he wants to. I think casting Ixalan's Binding on Snubhorn Sentry and then attacking with 2 Drakes is what he wants to be doing, then he still has a creature back to block that puts Andrew Elenbogen down to 2 creatures, meaning that he can't flip the Legion's Landing, and he has double Ionize to stop whatever Andrew Elenbogen can cast.
Because Elenbogen doesn't have a great way to accrue card advantage, right? He's playing a 1-for-1 game at the best of times, and the Down to the First Fort is one of the ways for the red-white aggro deck to play something of a value game. Not a great value game, but a value game nonetheless. And I like this from Mock. He is removing opportunities for Elenbogen to win this game by getting on the front foot, getting aggressive, and trying to whittle down his life total nice and quick. And here's that Ixalan's Binding, Paul. He's drawing it up just like you suggested.
Right. Just making sure you get all the motions right. We're in the top 8 of the Pro Tour.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Check, double check, do what you need to do.
You don't want to mess it up. And now, Elenbogen, I tell you what, if he draws a Snubhorn Sentry, he's going to feel pretty silly. But no, he just finds a land. It's looks like it was a Sacred Foundry here.
And and Wilson has this locked up. We're going to go to a game 5 here.
I think so. Elenbogen on what you would think is a very healthy 19, but it's not the case when these crackling Drakes are here to do business. They are going to take you down real quick. They've got a crushing handshake, and all of a sudden, Andrew Elenbogen under an obscene amount of pressure. Ionize is the safety valve here for Wilson Mock, and I don't think there is a way for Elenbogen to stitch a win here together. He just doesn't have it. Attacks now, very brave. Mock's going to block.
14 to 12. Yeah.
He gains a little bit of life in the process, does Elenbogen, but I mean, these Drakes can just push through lethal damage as early as this next turn.
Yeah. Well, Andrew's now at 14.
14, so maybe that's in one more turn.
It's not lethal now.
A Deafening Clarion as well for Mock here, but he's just going to get it done with all 3. Elenbogen takes a pasting.
This is going to put him down to 2.
Takes him down to 2 as he takes 12. Back down to Elenbogen now, who's on 2 life. He's going to pack him up, and we have a game 5 between Wilson Mock and Andrew Elenbogen. The thrills and spills continue between red-white aggro and Jeskai control as they both jostle for ultimate supremacy here in our first quarterfinal. And ladies and gentlemen, in the meantime, we are going to move back to our first table here with Yuuya Watanabe and Tay Jun Hao here. The Singaporean going up against the Japanese superstar. We have seen Izzet Drakes produce some tremendous firepower, Paul, but Tay Jun Hao has drawn very well. He's run pretty hot, and in the abstract, he's got a very good chance of taking this one down.
Yeah, I wonder what amount of removal Tay Jun Hao is actually going to look to bring in this matchup. He does have 3 Baffling Ends in his sideboard, and I think that might actually be pretty good here because it also stops Yuuya from having those explosive turns with the Goblin Electromancer, along with also dealing with the Enigma Drakes in his deck. So it does have 8 targets.
And of course, it's just straight up Terminate. Like, it doesn't...
There's no bounce effect.
There's no bounce effect. There's no way for red-blue decks to destroy enchantments. And so, as a result, it's a pretty safe bet that, you know, they're not going to get that 3/3
Wow, and
dinosaur.
an extremely slow start here from Tay Jun Hao. But if any card will help you come back from a slow start, it is History of Benalia.
How about 2 History Benalias?
That's also a reason I would keep a hand with no 1s and 2s.
Yep.
It is incredibly powerful when somebody goes turn 3 into turn 4 History of Benalia.
Yeah, because of course you get multiple triggers with giving +1/+2. It unloads a ridiculous amount of damage here. And Watanabe's hand is somewhere in the middle here. He's got the Murmuring Mystic. He can cast that Lava Coil if he want to keeps the board clear. And this is exactly what he does here. And I think one of the other factors that we need to consider here, by the look of things, Tay also took a mulligan down to 5. And you know, it's a good mulligan.
It is.
It's a good mulligan.
Mulling the 5 into double history and then another 1-drop is strong. But yes, it's gonna be very difficult. But even if Yuuya next turn plays a Drake, next turn history is going to go off.
And the other thing about Tay Jun
Hao
is that this mulligan of 5 has been ridiculous. Conclave Tribunal, the final card in hand. So if Watanabe is looking to put up the shields a little bit here, deploy a 3/4 flyer, Tay Jun Hao can just go, yeah, sure. Get that out of here, my friend.
Yeah, one of the nice tech cards that Yuuya has in his sideboard is Entrancing Melody, which is a very good way to deal with tokens. One nice thing, by the way, with the Murmuring Mystic is that it can block these knights, but Tay Jun Hao, of course, has the Conclave Tribunal that we know of. But the sizing of the Murmuring Mystic makes it such that you can even block a knight token after History of Benalia goes off.
But I don't think it's going to be enough here, as Tay does have
Was
that
that a
copy.
Legion's Landing?
Has he found a Legion's
That
Landing
was
as
like
well?
the perfect card.
Oh my goodness, it's just free.
Yeah.
It's just free. It creates a vampire, which can then be convoked to make the Conclave Tribunal here. And now all of a sudden, Tay Jun Hao firing it on all
Look
cylinders.
at this.
History of Benalia popping off the top. We're going to get in for a huge stack of damage here. Watanabe, an empty board for him. He's taking a cool 10 damage.
And he's flipping Legion's Landing. Did he forget to flip Legion's Landing?
I think he forgot to flip it.
Oh, no.
Doesn't need it, Paul. Doesn't want it, doesn't need
I
it.
think you want it.
Yeah, well, you know, that debate will rage on. But right now, Tay, a supremely dominant start from him. Watanabe is going to have to pull something very special together here. In hand for him, Arclight Phoenix, Discovery Dispersal, and a big stack of lands.
Oh my goodness. Imagine being on Yuuya's side of the board. He's like, you didn't flip Legion's Landing?
He's like, yeah, no, I didn't want it. I thought about it. I was thinking about it, but I was like,
Wanted
you
to
know
give you a
what?
chance.
I want to give you a chance. You know, I got to give you a run at
It's
it.
like, I mulled a 5. Don't flip my Legion's Landing. No big deal.
Yeah, it's fine.
Still incredibly
I had a
ahead.
perfect 7, and I was thinking, you know what? I'll give him a chance here. That's what I was thinking here. But Tay Jun Hao, the actual god hand here, a mulligan to 5 that
man.
is still putting him in such a commanding position. And what can Watanabe do? What is even step 1? What is even step 0 here for Watanabe?
Yeah, he is just so far behind. He just doesn't, you know, again, one of the most important cards to have as an option is that Fiery Cannonade, but Yuuya does not have any copies in his deck.
No, and we talked about this. Tay recognizing the lack of cards like Fiery Cannonade in the opposing list, given that players are given access to opposing lists here. He knew he didn't have to play conservatively. He can just dump his hand out and say, what are you going to do about this, my friend?
I mean, just imagine you're in a Yuuya situation, right? Your opponent mulligans to 5, doesn't play a 1-drop, doesn't play a 2-drop.
And you're like, oh my goodness.
man.
Yeah, you're already calling your friends,
Easy-
like lining up people
Easy
to high
game.
five.
We're going to game 5, folks.
Yeah,
Then
exactly.
they go history into history.
You're writing, you know, the letter, hey, dear mum, today in the top 8, I crushed this fool who mulliganed to 5, didn't have anything. And then all of a sudden, down to 10,
Yeah. And,
this game very
now it's-
swiftly falling away.
I don't even see how he comes back from this. Perhaps if he bins a couple of Arclight Phoenixes off this Discovery, then plays a couple more spells that are removal spells to get some of those creatures off the board.
Just like triple shock or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going to get it done here for Watanabe. A Crackling Drake in hand. Arclight Phoenix, the other card as well. Not great options here now that he's already committed to this Discovery Dispersal. And Enigma Drake Charter Course going to hit the bin. He's taking lethal next turn. He needs action now. He has no time to set up. That Murmuring Mystic was going to do a great job of locking things
Absolutely.
down. But the timely copy there of Conclave Tribunal got the 1-5 out of contention, pushed through 10 damage, and now Watanabe is staring down the barrel of imminent defeat at the hands of this upstart Singaporean, getting it done in the top 8 so far, threatening to push himself through to the semi-final here. And look at Watanabe's hand.
Oh, and I think this is very, like, Yuuya Watanabe needs to find exactly Shock, or Shock, because he has Mountain in hand. He needs Shock to be able to actually stay
He doesn't
alive
have it.
here.
He doesn't have it. That's going to be it.
Wow.
Tay Jun Hao makes the semi-final of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. Big smile on his face after an incredible game. A mulligan to 5, no 1-drop, no 2-drop. Curves out with the history of Benalia instead. A clutch Conclave Tribunal gets it done. And I tell you what, Yuuya Watanabe, he has to tell his story walking. I take my hat off to Tay Jun Hao. Just a great dude as well.
Right.
Very, very happy for his victory there. And I'm excited to see how he goes in the semi-final.
Yeah, I think the reason to play this Drake deck in the tournament was that you have the ability to beat control decks. You have the ability to grind through and beat the black-green decks. But I think the deck does struggle a little bit against these hyper-aggressive red-white decks. So this top 8 was just very, very bad for Yuuya Watanabe, as it had 6 red-white aggressive decks in the field.
Oh,
And-
his back was against the wall in a major way. And, you know, we said that Tay went into this matchup feeling confident, feeling as though he knew that post-board he could still play his natural game. And I think just from a psychological standpoint, knowing that he didn't have to make concessions to one of the greatest players in the world when it came to post-board matches, or games I should say, really put him in a good position to shine.
Well, I mean, this was one of those matchups, especially without the existence of Fiery Cannonade, where he can just play all of his threats and not have to worry. And his game plan of just getting in for as much damage as possible is all it takes for him to just be able to try to win this matchup, because there's no playing around anything.
Let's have a look now and see how things go between Wilson Mock and Andrew Elenbogen. Mock forcing a game 5 between these two players, and Elenbogen on a mulligan, unfortunately for him. Still getting busy with that Legion's landing, but Shivan Fire is a great play here from Mock, the Canadian, keeping the board nice and clear, and his hand is pretty well set up to tussle with what Elenbogen is doing here, especially with that history of Benalia.
Wilson is hoping for a history.
Oh, he doesn't
He's
have a
hoping for
choice.
history.
He doesn't have a choice. He has to play the
negate.
history, but the negate, worst art negate, takes care of history of Benalia, and Mock is off to a flyer already.
Yeah, this is the ideal start. 1 mana removal spell, negate for the history. You know, you always have to play that game when you play against a blue control deck. Did they have Essence Scatter, or did they have
Have the
negate?
negate, yep.
You know, he could have played maybe another creature there instead.
Do you know what would solve that problem? Here's a note just to take back to R&D. Reprint Counterspell. And then people don't have to worry about it.
Don't think we're doing that.
I feel like
anytime
that's
soon.
a good idea. We'll pick up this debate after the round's finished, Paul. But right now here, Mock is going to have to go up against this Ajani Adversary of Tyrants. This is a card, again, I talked to Mock about his sideboarding plan. He didn't anticipate that it would come in.
Right. Well, keep in mind, though, that the Ajani currently has no target.
Yeah, it's doing nothing.
There are no creatures in the graveyard. It's just on the battlefield. Of course, Planeswalkers are quite strong against Jeskai control, as they don't have too many answers to them. But if you don't actually have a creature to provide pressure, you're still in a lot of trouble.
And I'll tell you where the pressure's going to come from next turn, as we see a 5-mana 4/4 hit the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. This is not limited. We are playing constructed.
It's a 5-mana 5/5. It's a
Oh,
Colossopede.
excuse me.
Colossopede.
A Colossopede comes down with the help of the Adversary of Tyrants. But I'll tell you where the pressure's going to come from after this Chemist's Insight. We are going to see Lyra Dawnbringer get the job done here for Wilson Mock. The Mighty Angel slammed into play. That's going to contest the Teferi. That's going to buffer his life total. And that's going to put a huge amount of pressure on the American Andrew Elenbogen, who now is really right with his back right up against it.
Yeah, it's a nice little one-of in his deck, but it is able to completely shut the game down. Andrew really needs to find one of his few Conclave Tribunals to deal with it.
Well, an Experimental Frenzy may help him do that. Here we see Elenbogen very elegantly emptying out his hand before deploying this powerful enchantment here. And Security Detail has been launched for President Loxodon as he gets in now for 6.
Yeah,
5 mana 6/6.
And if Wilson Mock does not have an answer to this frenzy, I mean, this game is still going to be pretty close. So let's take a look and see what he has. You know what we might see?
I think we're going to see it.
There's a Cleansing
I
Nova
think
in Wilson Mock's
for the
hand.
first time in history, for the first time in the history of Magic the Gathering, we will see the secret mode engaged on Cleansing Nova. Although, does he have a second one? He does. There's a Clifftop Retreat hanging out there as well.
Okay, so he's giving Andrew one turn to kind of go off with this Experimental Frenzy and choosing to play a Crackling Drake instead and trying to close out the game.
So the March of Science continues now with an Experimental Frenzy. Let's see.
Let's see what happens
What
here.
these scientists can cook up. Here is History of Benalia. That's also going to die to the Cleansing Nova next turn.
Right, but he's still putting up quite an arm. What happens if Andrew just finds a bunch of creatures, though? Do you then have to cast the Wrath effect? Then you're really, really far behind. So this is interesting.
So Legion's Landing, another enchantment here. Obviously not hugely relevant against a Cleansing
And Andrew
Nova.
is just completely going off right now with this Experimental Frenzy. He's played 3 cards off of it so far.
Let's see if he can get it done again. It looks like it. Oh my goodness!
it's a
Oh my goodness!
Tribunal?
It's a Conclave Tribunal off the top. That is a huge play here. And I think now Mock is looking at that Cleansing Nova and he's going, "Oh, I'm not going to make Pro Tour history. I might have to just destroy all creatures here."
No, well, to be fair, no, he can still use the enchantment effect. Tribunal is not the worst because he can
Oh, he gets
play
it back.
Cleansing
Of
Nova,
course.
removing the enchantment, and get back that Cleansing
so
Nova.
dumb.
But, you know, had he just fired off that Cleansing Nova on the previous turn, could have prevented a lot of this.
Well, he may be able to get himself back in it here. Cleansing Nova, of course. We don't see destroying artifacts and enchantments too often. But Mock's in a good position to take advantage of the hidden mode, the flavor text mode of Cleansing Nova. And now, Elenbogen deciding where to put these Ajani tokens and triggers, and to figure out exactly what his attacks are going to look like.
Yeah, this is a gigantic attack. Andrew Elenbogen is attacking in for 10 this turn with the Dauntless Bodyguard and the Loxodon. And now Wilson has to fire off that Cleansing Nova. Ooh, and a pretty nice draw on top of that. He drew a Lava Coil as well. So he can actually remove all the enchantments. He can get rid of Legion's Landing, Experimental Frenzy, and the Conclave Tribunal. and then use Lava Coil to remove a creature.
So Ajani is also going to eat the bite the dust now, thanks to that Crackling Drake attack.
This is one of the best cleansing Novas I've seen, at least on the other half of the mode.
I think it's the only one I've ever seen on the other half of that mode, as we see now Dauntless Bodyguard sacrificed to give the Loxodon indestructible. But here is Cleansing Nova, and it looks like it's going to be artifacts and enchantments. Yes, it is. Away goes. Look at this. You don't often see a 4-for-1 Cleansing Nova with artifacts and enchantments, but that is the way that Wilson Mock's getting it done. He gets his Lyra Dawnbringer back as well into the bargain. Now the only thing he has to really worry about is that massive elephant.
Yeah, well, there also Tribunal. Tribunal would be annoying, as Andrew can then get rid of that Lyra Dawnbringer and make a big attack.
But it's another experimental frenzy. And finds a Snubhorn Sentry just for good measure as well. He does have the City's Blessing, so it is going to be a 3-3. So now it's not just the elephant in the room. He's got to worry about the dinosaur and the bodyguard in the room as well. And all of them contributing to the cause. The onward march of science. In comes the Loxodon once again.
This is really tough. Now what is Wilson Mock going to do? That Frenzy can take over the game. So if Wilson uses that mode, he can certainly remove that Experimental Frenzy. But Andrew Elenbogen also just has a huge army in play right now. Deafening Clarion would be a huge draw.
Has he got another copy of Cleansing Nova in hand? He's got a second copy of it.
Right.
As we see Chemist's Insight.
He's going for Chemist's Insight. Can he find a Deafening Clarion to give that Crackling Drake lifelink and remove many of Andrew Elenbogen's creatures?
If he can clear the way here with something like a Clarion, as you say, Paul, that's going to put him right back in it. I mean, he can buffer his life total up to 9 thanks to an attack with the Dawnbringer, but what position does that put him in a better position?
I mean, does that put him dead on board? Snubborn Sentry 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It would not put him dead on board. If he attacks with the Dawnbringer, trades the Crackling Drake with the Loxodon, he would take 8 damage and go down to 1, as he will gain 5 life if he attacks with the Lyra Dawnbringer. Alternatively, he can choose to play defensively, but with an active Experimental Frenzy, that is pretty tough.
Man, this is tight now. This is very close. Mock has not got room to maneuver at all. He has to take some very tight lines here if he wants to get himself across the finish line. Elenbogen, hellbent. Little shake of the hands there indicates that he's got no cards in hand. Not that he could play them anyway, of course, for several reasons. Tapped out, Experimental Frenzy.
And going back to that one turn where he chose to play the Crackling Drake, and Andrew Elenbogen was able to string together 3 or 4 spells in a row and just put so much pressure onto the battlefield, that might be big. But to be fair, Andrew Elenbogen did have that second copy of Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, that was a clutch grip.
So even if Wilson followed up, even if Wilson had played a Cleansing Nova, it's possible that Andrew Elenbogen had the second copy of Frenzy in his hand.
That was a righteous draw there for Elenbogen, able to replace the Experimental Frenzy immediately. And of course, this obscenely powerful card advantage engine has done such good work for the American now. Mock, with 2 mana. He does have a Justice Strike in hand, so that's going to change things a little bit here, Paul.
But he does not have lethal just yet.
So Justice Strike on the Dauntless Bodyguard here. Of course, if he goes after the Loxodon, the Bodyguard will just be sacrificed anyway, and sacrificed it is, to make sure the elephant has indestructible.
So he can actually just attack with Crackling Drake.
Looks like he's going to buffer his life total instead with a life-linking Angel. Lyra Dawnbringer comes across, and Dawn is indeed brung.
So
as Mock goes up to 9.
Actually, the removal spell was very key here, because now Wilson Mock can cleanly trade Crackling Drake with the Loxodon, and he will only be taking 6 damage.
And the reason that we saw the main phase deployment of that instant Justice Strike there is because otherwise, if it were done on Elenbogen's turn, as we saw, he'd sacrifice it, give the Loxodon indestructible, and then there'd
But
be
it's
no
Frenzy
trade.
time.
It's Frenzy time indeed. Snubhorn Sentry number 2 comes down. And let's see if Elenbogen has hit the
Why did he
unfortunate
tap the
stop.
Frenzy? He must have played a land off of it, signaling that he's played a land off of it.
Yeah, that's tech.
Yeah, players do different things. I've seen players put a land that they played off the Frenzy behind the Frenzy.
So big attack now for Elenbogen, but of course the Loxodon is contested by that Crackling Drake, which by our count is big enough here.
Yeah.
Of course, counting the Chemist's Insight in exile. And so now an attack for
7.
3-7
So he's
puts
going
Mock to 2.
Mock down to 2. And if Wilson Mock chooses to attack here, Andrew Elenbogen does have a lethal attack back for 9. So Wilson Mock does need to find something here.
Yeah, that second snubhorn sentry.
Clarion would be huge.
He does have Cleansing Nova, of course, and I think the draw for this turn was Negate.
That's not going to get it done. Now what he can do is basically now he has to play defensively. If he blocks a Snubhorn Sentry, he'll go to 7, and then Snubhorn plus the other creatures is 3, 4, 5, 6. No, this is. I think Wilson Mock is just dead, and the only way to stay alive might be to just cast Cleansing Nova for Wrath.
Yep.
But then that means we still have an Experimental Frenzy on the battlefield.
And the advantage is very much on the side of Andrew
Right?
Elenbogen.
I just want to make sure because there's a 3/3 knight. There's 3 3/3s on the battlefield and a 1/1. So if Wilson Mock blocks one of the 3/3s, he's still going to take 7 damage.
So instead, an attack, put him up to 7, and this
And then
almost
he has to
certainly.
play the-
I mean, he has to. If he F6s through this turn, it's going to be the biggest disaster in the history of the Pro Tour. Let's see what Wilson Mock is going to do. I think we're pretty set on that post-combat Cleansing Nova. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, Wilson. Yeah, that was a really, really big draw. And now Andrew is incredibly ahead as he's the person with an active Experimental Frenzy on an empty board.
I mean, even after this huge cleanup from Wilson Mock, Elenbogen is still in a world of in a world of luxury now, thanks to his Experimental Frenzy. Kicks things off with the Banalish Marshal.
Here we go.
Great start. Mock does have the negate.
Why did he pause there? It must have been like a Conclave Tribunal or something because it definitely gave him some pause. And if it was a land, he would have played it right away.
Nothing. Okay. All right. So Elenbogen does find some, just a little bit of gold dust with Banalish Marshal, but he's not tripping over big nuggets. And we move back now.
I'm trying to
Wilson
figure out
Mock.
what that top card could be. It must be Tribunal, right? It must be some kind of removal spell because nothing else makes sense there.
Because otherwise he'd just cast it.
Right.
Yeah, or play it if it's a land. Mock, invoke the Divine in hand.
Oh, big draw.
He has to cast it, right? Yeah, he's
Right.
going to cast it in the upkeep.
Upkeep. Well, if he cast it on upkeep. Now Andrew Elenbogen can sacrifice the Experimental Frenzy to prevent the life gain, but he's actually choosing not to.
Not going to do it, and that may be key here as Mock puts himself back up to 11. So a key play there from the Canadian, making sure that Elenbogen was
draw.
faced with a bad choice there. And
It was a Tribunal. It was a Tribunal.
It was a Paul, mate, you're a master. You're a wizard. As we see now, Snubhorn Sentry enter the battlefield. And so Mock's first permanent is going to be contested by the Conclave Tribunal, and he needs a way to deal with both of these creatures.
It's not lethal just yet. That's only 7 damage. So if Wilson Mock finds something like a Crackling Drake, that would be big.
Deafening Clarion also
would do it.
Would get the job done here because, of course, the Snubhorn Sentry, despite being a 4/4, it would die to the Clarion.
Right. As the Clarion would remove the Banalish Marshal from the battlefield, and then the Snubhorn Sentry will be a 3/3 and take lethal damage.
So the fact that Elenbogen didn't destroy his own Experimental Frenzy may be key here because it means that Elenbogen doesn't have a lethal attack next turn. 5 mana. It's Teferi. And Mock thinks about where he wants to go. Upstairs, downstairs, or in my lady's chamber. Let's have a look. Wilson Mock. Oh, mate,
Wilson
come
Mock.
on. Give us what we want. What is the card? Negate in hand. And a new one, a freshie from Teferi, but we're not going to get to see what it is. Glacial Fortress, another card for him. Don't know if that was the card that he drew, but it's back to Elenbogen again.
And if you're Andrew, like this is also very interesting. Do you go? Oh, right. He has, of course, the Tribunal. I think you just go for the Teferi and just go for the attack. But we do know Wilson Mock has Negate.
He's got Negate.
He's gonna fire off that Negate. And now Andrew Elenbogen has that decision. Does he want to deal 7 damage to Wilson Mock or kill that Teferi?
I think he's going to go for the Teferi, and I commend him for the decision.
Yep.
It's just too scary a card to let live. You've got to take the game.
If you don't have
get
lethal,
yep.
you go for the
You have
Teferi.
to get the Teferi because it means not only is Wilson Mock drawing an extra card a turn, he is also up on mana. If he's finding stuff that is mana hungry, is mana intensive plays, it means that he's going to be in a great position. Judges stepping in here just to ensure the life totals are correct by the look of things. We may be able to have a listen in here. Looks like it's all good. So we move on now with Elenbogen at 9 and Mock at 8.
This is extremely close. That was an incredibly important Invoke the Divine from Wilson Mock to stay alive here.
Doesn't have anything this time around, just an Essence Scatter in hand, and these reactive spells are not great when you are facing down such powerful attackers like this. So Mock, He has been walking this tightrope masterfully, but I'm worried that it's coming closer and closer to an end here, Paul.
What is he playing around?
Settle the wreckage? No.
But you should know deck
He knows
lists.
he doesn't have it. Is he playing around Seal Away? Oh, no. He look at this. He's convoking the venerated Loxodon, but it's not going to be any good. Wilson Mock getting full value from that.
Oh, and that makes sense. So the reason why he chose to... Oh!
But it's not enough. It's not enough. And Andrew Elenbogen, after Wilson Mock fails to find anything that's going to keep him in this game with a lethal attack coming across next turn, the Canadian bows out. And congratulations to Andrew Elenbogen. What a performance from him, Paul. He kept his cool. He kept his composure, overcame a huge number of obstacles there, and got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, Wilson Mock had the ideal start. Removal spell, negate for History of Benalia, turn 5 Lyra Dawnbringer, and then the Crackling Drake, and it looked like he just couldn't possibly lose.
Yeah.
But we saw the power of Experimental Frenzy just being unleashed there. I mean, Andrew Elenbogen was able to play 4 spells off that card before it was removed.
And there was a little bit of greed from Mock there. He was like, no, I'll cash in this Experimental Frenzy next turn. I know I'm going to get more value out of it then, but I think in doing... I mean, yeah, he got the 4 for 1,
right?
But he just gave a little bit too much tempo, a little bit too much momentum to Andrew Elenbogen, and as a result, he paid the price.
Yeah, and just one quick thing. The reason why Andrew Elenbogen went for the Convoke on the Loxodon there is because he didn't have a lethal attack, and if the Venerated Loxodon resolves, he gets to put a counter on the Benalish Marshal, which allows him to play around a potential Deafening Clarion.
Yeah, really heads up stuff from him. I tell you what, it was one of the most deftly navigated and very, very tricky situations there for Elenbogen, but he got across the line, he got it done, and we're going to see him in the semifinals.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, advantage bar, just.
Oh yeah,
bouncing
around. That's it. That is all she wrote for our first round of quarterfinals, ladies and gentlemen. But of course, coming up after this, we're going to be checking in with the man himself, Luis Scott Vargas. He'll be playing as part of our top 8 live, so you're not going to want to miss a minute. We'll be back live from Atlanta after this.